The ocean remembers everything. Long before satellites mapped the Pacific, and long before the name America existed, the sea already knew the Marquesas Islands. It carried their secrets in its deep blue silence. Stories of fearless navigators, vanished civilizations, sacred stones that seemed alive, and a people who learned to survive at the very edge of the known world. What follows is not a myth, not a legend invented for romance, but a historical, astonishing, and deeply human story of the most isolated islands on Earth. A story that still echoes across the waves of French Polynesia. The Marquesas Islands rise abruptly from the Pacific like the broken teeth of a giant. Unlike the gentle lagoons of Tahiti or Bora Bora, there are no protective coral reefs here. The ocean crashes directly into towering black cliffs carved by time and volcanic fire. For thousands of years, these islands stood alone, more than 3,000 miles from the nearest continent, making them one of the most isolated inhabited places in human history. Yet, against every logical expectation, human beings arrived here, thrived here, and built one of the most complex societies in Oceania. Around 2,000 years ago, Polynesian navigators set out from somewhere in Southeast Asia or the Western Pacific in double-hulled canoes made only of wood, fiber, and faith in the stars. They had no compass, no maps, no metal tools. What they had was knowledge, passed down orally for generations, of wind patterns, ocean swells, bird behavior, cloud formations, and the subtle color changes of the sea. To modern Americans accustomed to GPS and radar, this seems almost impossible. Yet these navigators crossed thousands of miles of open ocean and found the Marquesas, small volcanic islands barely visible on the horizon. When they arrived, the islands were wild and unforgiving. Steep valleys, sharp ridges, unpredictable rainfall, and violent seas made survival a daily challenge. There were no large mammals, no grains like wheat or rice. Everything had to be built from scratch. Agriculture, social order, spiritual life. And yet, within centuries, the Marquesans created a thriving civilization that stunned European explorers when they finally arrived. The land shaped the people, and the people shaped the land. Marquesan society was organized around valleys, each ruled by powerful chiefs whose authority came not just from strength, but from genealogy and spiritual power known as mana. This invisible force was believed to flow through ancestors, gods, stones, and even words. A chief with strong mana could bring prosperity or disaster. Warfare between valleys was common, but it followed strict cultural rules. Victory was not just about conquest, it was about honor, balance, and divine favor. One of the most shocking aspects for early Western visitors was the practice of ritual cannibalism. For centuries, Americans and Europeans misunderstood it as savage brutality. Historical evidence now suggests a far more complex reality. Cannibalism in the Marquesas was rare, symbolic, and deeply spiritual. Consuming a defeated enemy was believed to transfer their mana, not to satisfy hunger. It was an act tied to cosmology, not cruelty. Ironically, Western diseases and colonial violence would later kill far more Marquesans than any inter-valley war ever did. The Marquesans were master artists. Their bodies were living canvases covered in intricate tattoos that told stories of lineage, achievements, and spiritual protection. Tattooing was sacred, painful, and transformative. To endure it was to prove one's worth. Stone statues known as tiki guarded sacred sites called mea. These figures, with their oversized eyes and powerful stance, were not idols in the Western sense, but ancestral presences, watchers between the human and divine worlds. By the time Europeans arrived, the Marquesas supported a population estimated between 50,000 and 100,000 people, an astonishing number given the island's harsh environment. Terraced agriculture climbed the hillsides. Breadfruit, taro, yams, and bananas sustained life. Freshwater was carefully managed through stone channels. Everything was interconnected: land, sea, ancestors, gods. Then, in 1595, the silence broke. Spanish explorer Álvaro de Mendaña stumbled upon the islands while searching for the fabled southern continent. He named them Las Marquesas de Mendoza. His arrival marked the beginning of an irreversible transformation. At first, encounters were cautious, even friendly, but misunderstanding followed quickly. European concepts of ownership, religion, and morality clashed violently with Marquesan culture. The greatest enemy was invisible. Diseases like smallpox, tuberculosis, and influenza swept through the islands. The Marquesans had no immunity. Entire valleys were wiped out within years. By the mid-19th century, the population collapsed to fewer than 5,000 people. One of the most dramatic population declines in human history had occurred, largely unnoticed by the outside world. American ships were among those that arrived during this turbulent era. Whalers from New England anchored in Marquesan bays, bringing trade goods, alcohol, firearms, and missionaries. Herman Melville, later famous for Moby Dick, lived among the Marquesans in 1842 after deserting a whaling ship. His novel Type E introduced American readers to a romanticized but deeply influential image of Polynesian life. For the first time, the United States began to imagine the Pacific not just as empty ocean, but as a world of ancient cultures and untold stories. France formally annexed the Marquesas in 1842, and colonial rule followed. Traditional religion was suppressed, tattooing was banned, sacred sites were destroyed or abandoned. Children were taught to be ashamed of their ancestors. For a time, it seemed as if Marquesan culture would vanish entirely. But isolation, once a curse, became a shield. Because the Marquesas were so remote and economically unimportant, they escaped the full weight of industrial exploitation. In the 20th century, a cultural revival began. Elders remembered old chants. Archaeologists uncovered buried temples. Tattoo artists revived ancient designs. Today, the Marquesas are one of the strongest centers of Polynesian cultural identity. Modern Americans who visit the islands often describe a strange feeling, something difficult to explain. The cliffs feel alive, the valleys seem to breathe. At night, when the stars stretch from horizon to horizon with no city lights to dim them, it becomes easier to understand how ancient navigators crossed oceans guided only by the sky. The isolation forces reflection. There is no rushing here. Time moves differently. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson the Marquesas offer the modern world. In an age of constant connection, these islands remind us what it means to live at the edge, to depend on community, memory, and respect for nature. The Marquesans survived where logic said they should not. They built beauty in a place of danger. They remembered who they were, even when the world tried to make them forget. The ocean still remembers them, and if you listen closely, beyond the noise of modern life, you might remember something too.